welcome everybody. Nobody's on yet, but my name is Chris. Episode 3 of We That Parents. This is a brand new podcast, so we're just getting things going. And I've had some really cool guests for episode 1 and 2, and I'm very happy to have this guest, Dr. Carlos Rivera, who is a pediatrician. That is what you have your doctorate in, correct?
Yeah.
So you're a doctor for children.
Yeah.
I can't wait to talk about that.
It's funny because I grew up blue collar, so I went to college and I ended up working in construction. So when I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this, I was talking to some guys on the crew. They're like, you're never going to get into med school. I was like, we'll see what happens. We'll give it a shot. So I went from breaking up concrete and moving rebar to med school all within a couple of months, and it was just kind of like, all right, how the hell did I get here? But all right,
that should be inspiring to a lot of people. So you were doing construction. When did you start going to medical school?
I got to think, because I graduated in 89, and I think I was working and going back to school for about 2 years. Wait, I got in 89 to 93 is when I officially started medical school, because of the whole, I had to change credits and all that other fun stuff, and then do the application process.
What made you want to be a pediatrician? Just curiosity.
It's interesting. I grew up, and my mom was a nurse. She was an LPN, and I've always been interested in, science and medicine. I volunteered as a kid, and I went into school thinking I was going to go into anesthesia. And then I started thinking, I want to be like a small town kind of doctor, that kind of thing. And I was like, all right, let me do family medicine. So I started out doing a year of family medicine, but that was pretty much, my daughter was born right before residency started. And then seeing her developmental, progression and all that other stuff, it just became more exciting to me. Pediatrics, it kind of lent itself right there. So I did about a year of family medicine, then changed over to peds.
That's great. Great. So I know a little bit about you. Basically, I got started in this movement in about 2018 and started getting a taste of it. I got started with the Father's Rights movement and sort of have gravitated around working with different movements indirectly, and sort of started this podcast. I sort of figured out what my talents were and what I could bring, and I can talk a lot, and I also write music. But
all right,
for you, sir, tell us about your story, because when I came to this movement, you, among a few other names, and it's weird. It's like this weird celebrity within this shared parenting movement, or this family law movement, where you were one of the names that's sort of like, well, I don't want to call you one of the grandfathers of the family, of the shared parenting movement. I'm 38 years old. I was 35, 36 when I came to this, and there was a lot of guys like yourself who've been doing it, 10, 15, 20, and sometimes even 30 years. And you were one of the guys, and you're from Long Island, which is where I'm originally from. And where are you from in Long Island?
Well, I originally grew up in Deer Park, but my practice and this journey started for me. I was living in Patchogue at the time.
Okay. Yeah, I think I told you I was born in Huntington Hospital.
All right.
And grew up in East Northport. So grew up, right there on the shore, and moved to North Carolina. But going into your story, I really want to ask you a lot about, especially being a pediatrician. Okay. I really want to focus, if you can help explain to our audience, with this family law thing that we're going through, and the parental alienation and child support and false allegations and everything that we've experienced. How is it that someone who's never been charged with a crime, be it a felony or a violent crime, I'm sure you've yelled at people before in your life or raised your voice.
No, actually, I'm pretty mellow, and I'm pretty much a walkover, that kind of thing.
Well, I yell at people.
I was always quiet and stuff like that, and always a geek in high school and junior high, that kind of thing. So I was always a guy in the periphery, really quiet. But you had mentioned something about me being in the movement for a while, and I don't think that I was too much ahead of you. This for me really started in 2013 is where I really got a real flavor of the whole family court system. And I find myself more of a poster boy for bad luck than anything, but that's why, I'm very into what you're doing here and giving people the opportunity to tell a story, because I think it's very important for us to try to get the word out before people become victims, like we became victims. And I think that part of my problem, what happened to me, was I believed in the system with the faith of a child, that it's, it's just, it's fair, and the facts will come out, and that'll be all you really need if you have the truth behind you. And the truth is, we both know how the system works, and that's not the truth at all. It's basically
Right.
it's a disease system from the ground up.
Right.
But to answer your question, it's very, very interesting, because I am, I was trained in pediatrics, and I've been practicing medicine for about 20 years now. But I had never heard of parental alienation until it happened to me.
Right.
Which seems interesting, because when I was seeing children of divorce and families in the process of divorce, I was familiar with it as, as a consequence of divorce. Like, okay, this is a bad divorce. It's kind of high conflict. It's a little, you got to be careful, not treading water, but like, okay, we got to be a little careful. This is a rough situation. But it wasn't until that I was a targeted parent in alienation that I even heard of what it was. I actually heard of it through a patient that said I should look into it. And he told me about Alec Baldwin, and his divorce and parental alienation. So that was like my rude awakening to the whole thing. And then, just like you, whenever you read about parental alienation, like, you look at the book and like, that's what happened to me. It's almost like you're looking at a playbook.
And it's weird, like you said, you use that term playbook. It's almost like the characteristics of an alienator are very similar, and that's because the type of people that do this usually suffer from conditions, whether it be trauma, whether it be personality disorder, narcissistic personality. We've thrown around all these disorders, or having grown up fatherless or abused themselves. We do like to always preface, and I always like to use the word preface, that it happens to men and women. Overwhelmingly, ladies, this does happen to fathers, and that's more of a systematic creation because of money, profit. As you and I both know, that up until the last few decades, fathers typically made the most money, if not the only money in a household. And they figured out how to create an industry, but you have to monetize that industry. And so what do you have to do? Well, you have to sell a false narrative. Now that we know that's a false narrative, especially if you look at society and what's happening, that mothers are the superior parent, therefore the care of the children should be with them, and fathers, keep doing what you're doing and send money. And we know that that is actually a false narrative. Parents are equally as valuable. We bring different cards to the tables. And when you don't have one versus the other, it does create an imbalance.
The problem with this, the way I see it, is, a pendulum swings, and it's overcorrection in either case, and I think that what we're looking at is a very antiquated system with this paternalistic type of ideology, and the tender years doctrine, where the mother is the more suited caregiver. And part of what bothers me is the current culture of divorce portrays fathers as uninterested, disengaged, not motivated to be near the children, and not having the same type of love or strength of love that a mother would have with her child. And whenever I get into this discussion with people, you always run into the well, you don't know what it's like to have a child grow within you. And it's like, well, biologically, that'll never happen. And I understand that. I'll never truly know what that is like. But even as, we were both part of creating life. This wouldn't have happened without me. I mean, it couldn't happen solely on your own. And, there is a love there and a desire to be in my children's lives. And, I'm not quite sure if you are. I'm guessing that you are a child of divorce yourself.
So my parents, what's weird, they're actually having dinner together right now.
Okay.
They've been very supportive. My parents definitely went through their stuff and divorced much later in my life. So they stuck it through till I was about 16 or 17. So I was off being a juvenile delinquent with my dysfunctional friends when my parents got divorced. So kudos to them. They did a really good job despite their upbringings, which weren't perfect. And they're I wouldn't say they're best of friends today, but I tell you what, it's nice to be able to hang out with your mom and dad. And most of the time, it's like old times. They're joking with you, and they joke about the bad stuff, and yeah, that was bad, and like I said, they're having dinner together right now, which is pretty neat.
That's nice. I always like hearing stories like that because now they stick. Your parents would stick out as the exception, not the norm, and hopefully, with your reach and the people who watch you, that'll change, in time.
Right.
And it's very interesting for me to go through it because simultaneously my girlfriend was going through a divorce at the same time,
Hmm.
and we're polar opposites. My divorce, despite my nature being very passive and okay, fine, whatever makes you happy, my ex chose a much more acrimonious path, and she's very she came out guns blazing from minute one. My girlfriend, on the other hand, their marriage ended, and it's sad, but they still they still help each other out when he has this things that he needs to clarify or things he needs help with, some type of documents. He'll have her look into it. They do everything for the kids still together, so they function as well as you can for a couple. There's times where people don't even know they broke up because they'll attend their daughter's sporting events together and still talk to each other. And that's the way it should be. It should just be that, like, okay, listen, the relationship didn't work out. It's it's very difficult for everybody, but
Hmm.
let's we started out as friends. Let's just continue that way and wish each other well and try to help each other. And I think too many people are brought into the system, and attorneys enter it, and they try now to they pitch you against each other for a win or lose battle. And we know your guests come on all the time, and basically once the attorneys come in, it becomes a big mess.
Right. So let's talk about that since we sort of segued into that. What what is your take on what this is as far as an industry, and how familiar? I mean, probably we would agree to the same things, that this was historically, there was a sequence of events and policies, domestic policies, and laws and things that sort of created this family law industry, which is a very vague judicial system. It's very the only thing defined, which is undefined, is the best interest of the child. Well, arguably, two happy, healthy parents with an equal relationship with their child is in the best interest of the child. We know that indisputably. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of old school judges and a lot of corrupt individuals, especially in New York, that use this to their benefit. You know, help
It's
explain to the audience how this sort of developed over time.
my feelings on it have changed over time. We're doing this and working with other parents that have been victimized. And I used to think that the system morphed into this, that people were seduced by power and greed, and the industry, it became an industry. I'm starting to think more and more that it was designed to be this way,
Right.
because it's a little too perfect when you look at it,
Right.
to be coincidental that it morphed into this. And we've all seen it. When it could, I don't think that there's, for some people, the seduction and money is going to be too much to give up, and it really seems to me that there's just a callous indifference to what happens to the parents in this system. And the fact that they use that terminology in the best interest of the children irritates me to the core, because
Right.
from the get-go, there is nothing designed to protect the children. I think that when you try to say it's 50-50 custody, but one has, the custodial parent has a little bit more time with them, just because of the way it's designed, I think that's a problem. I think when you set up the premise for the stipulations to be based on the lifestyle the children would have enjoyed should the parents have stayed together, it's like, well, they didn't, and
Right.
now we have a big problem. So, if we had a two-income household to survive as a family, there is no way that that this same financial arrangement is going to now provide for two equivalent homes for the kids to be in at different times.
Hmm.
So I think that it's, to me, it's propaganda that
Hmm.
they use this terminology, and they fed it to the masses, and the masses believe it. But once you become ensnared in the system, you see it for what it really is, and it's just a huge money making machine.
So what, and go beyond the courts and go beyond the state. Let's look at what industries it helps fuel and profit, and that profit from it, which is um you're in your field. I mean, tell me how much you experienced of behavioral issues. You said you noticed in your practice. Do you still practice medicine, pediatrics?
Yeah, I do. I used to have an office setting where I had a very large practice, but unfortunately for what had happened to me, I had lost the practice because I was incarcerated for child support. I ended up working for somebody for a little while, but then I'm very open about my struggles with depression that were exacerbated by this
Sure.
whole situation, and being incarcerated for 6 months and jail always being held over my head and being alienated. My depression worsened, and I ended up being diagnosed with PTSD, and was out on disability for it. So I'm very open with that, because in my journey, I felt very isolated, and I felt that this was something unique happening to me, and that it was just something I was having trouble dealing with. I wasn't acknowledging the fact that, what I say to people now is, it's not in my nature, but if you gave me the authority to find someone's breaking point and get away with it, I could find people's breaking points. I could drive you to the point where, life becomes very difficult, and you could develop, either emotional angst, anxiety, depression, PTSD. And I think that's what happens to a lot of us. I had somebody that I spoke to today that told me something very, very interesting. And that since I had suffered from depression, I had had a major depressive episode, or a nervous breakdown, as it's commonly called.
Right.
And you think to the point that you're estranged from your kids, you don't see them, it becomes so hard, life has changed so much, and it becomes a baseline of misery.
Right.
And this person, who I never really thought would have this thought, says, at some point, I think every person, every person in a high conflict divorce gets the thought crossed through the head, like, they'd be better off if their life just ended.
Right.
And that to me was very, very surprising, because, having fought with depression my whole life, I thought that this was, again, something that was, basically, something that I suffered from as an individual.
Right.
But then it was in a kind of I stopped and thought about it, because this is somebody who never appeared to be depressed to me, and has a very, a life that I would consider enjoyable. He's a drummer. He has a day job, but he does gigs, and he's a musician, and he seems to be always very happy, and he's in a very supportive relationship now. So to hear that, and this is like, I speak to on a daily basis, alienated fathers that are just miserable, and some of them, I truly worry if they're at that brink. And, how many people, I don't know, Christian, how many people do you encounter a day or on any given week do you say, listen, I'm really worried about this guy? It's a little bit more than down.
Yeah. And I mean, I've felt it before, and it was the first time I've ever felt it, was this hopelessness. I'll call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, the thought in my mind was, I'm broke. I'm essentially homeless. My credit's destroyed. I'm fighting to see my kids. I can't afford attorneys anymore. The ones that I could afford wasted all my money and wasted all my time. And we compare it a lot to mourning the loss of a child that's still alive. And it's a weird thing. And if you look at the as men, we're taught not to feel, and that be a man and bootstraps and all that good stuff. And I think you and me are actually doing that right here. I think we're survivors of an abusive system. I think that we've suffered depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever you call it, and we've come out of it. We're coming out of it. I think it's a daily thing. There's certainly days that I struggle more with it. Where I might need to go to the gym, or I need to talk a lot, or I get to do this. This is therapeutic for me. Just speaking with you and relating to the people that are watching, and knowing that you're not alone is the key, I think. But also, like you said, being transparent. Nothing has made me stronger than admitting that I'm weak.
Yeah.
Period. Sorry, guys. There's a lot of strength in me, and there's a lot of moments of weakness. And when I get to, when we get to speak on that and let it out. It helps us get through, and it lets us put those bootstraps back on again. So,
It's interesting. What I kind of found was that it was a very difficult and painful process, and it was this unrelenting misery that wouldn't let up for the same factors you brought up. Humiliation, financial devastation, and whatnot. And I had always hid my depression, and people, I have patients that once I started disclosing it, they're like, I would have never guessed. I mean, you seem like, so confident, and you always seem to be joking around. It's like, it's the face you put on. You learn to put on this persona,
social mask.
yeah, to basically to get into society and to function.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of people to this day confess to me of their struggles, and how they may have had a suicide attempt, or they think about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit there and I think I used to be a lot into this is unfair, and what did I ever do to deserve this? And I remember pulling over in my car in tears, and being like, God, if you're trying to teach me a lesson, I think I got it.
Right.
If you want me to be sorry, I'm just sorry. Like, please, just give me a breather. And then I thought that I'm not alone in this, and I learned to, the obvious became visible to me, that I said, it's unfair that what I went through, the incarceration and being alienated from my kids. But I go, somebody left for work today, and their husband had a heart attack and died. The wife, had an aneurysm blow, and she's dead. Their kid gets cancer. It's like, they didn't deserve that.
Right.
So my problems are manageable. They suck, trust me, and I hate them.
Right.
But, there's always something that we should be grateful for. And, I'm grateful that, I have the opportunity to share this, and I've had people approach me and say, you got me through a really hard time. I was like, what the hell did I do?
Right.
And I think that just by, like yourself, you share your story and let them know they're not alone, and that it is survivable.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people need to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, I was in program for a little while. I went to AA for a little while. When I was experiencing all these things, I noticed that, before my relationship was very terrible. I was participating in it to the point that I was trying to fix it, and I couldn't fix it. So, I was working all the time. And then when I'd come home, it was miserable. I added to that misery myself. I'm not blameless. I realized through my couple of years of sobriety, complete sobriety, was that that my abuse was very responsive, and it was out of fear of not being able to fix this thing. We have 2 kids. What if I can't make it work? And I don't want to fight. Men don't want to come from broken homes. Women don't want to come from broken homes. None of this is on purpose. But yes, the depression and all that was hitting in, and what I was doing was when I wasn't working, and I wanted an escape. I was trying to cope. So going back to being in program, a lot of the biggest thing that I got out of AA was being in a room full of regular, normal, dysfunctional people that are saying, hey, I'm going through that too. Yeah. And you didn't feel weird. You didn't feel isolated. You didn't feel alone. And a lot of people, I would say most people don't all do what we're doing.
No, I don't think most do.
Today. Like, and one of our messages could definitely be, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're all weird. We're all broken. We're all dysfunctional. Talk about it.
I think that's one thing that people need to realize. And actually, one of my biggest mentors and spiritual help came from my uncle, who was divorced twice. And actually, when you get divorced, you go to somebody who's been through it together to say, hey, listen, we just broke up and this happened. And my uncle was very big into Al-Anon, and he had a lot of really good advice. And I had not too long ago started attending some Al-Anon meetings, because I think that the philosophy helps and the messages that you hear in Al-Anon helps. And, I was never directly impacted by drinking. It's not my thing, and my parents weren't drinkers, but I have extended family that it's, the alcoholism has been, quite the issue in some extended family. But I think that to hear people's stories and how they get through it and how they cope, because I've made countless mistakes in the, geez, what is it now? 2011. So we're going on 10 years now of this whole process of divorce. And my girlfriend suffered a lot through it. She's been supportive the whole time, but we've had some tumultuous times. And when I look back, the vast majority of the problems I've had have been rooted in the divorce. The stress I was going through from it, the alienation from my kids, and I think that it's very hard for us to have a relationship subsequent to our divorces and have those relationships succeed. And I think that that's why the second marriage statistics is so miserable. I think that most people are still dealing with their first marriage. You bring that luggage into a new relationship, and it's very hard for that relationship to survive.
I've stayed single this entire time until I worked on myself, and I'm at a place where I think I'm ready personally. I've been single over 2 years now. 2.5 years, something like that. I've gone on a few dates, and guys, it's okay to take time for yourself, because the first thing we want to do, which my ex did, and I don't know about your situation, was they found someone new. And you can always find who the loyal person is when the two people break up and one person's alone and the other one's already in a relationship. And I knew that the whole relationship, the whole situation hurt so bad that I knew I never wanted to repeat it again, that I wouldn't go through it again, that I wouldn't be so blind and ignorant in my own decision making, that I would not ignore the red flags, that I wouldn't see somebody, see their goodness, but also ignore the negativity and go, well, maybe that's nothing. I can fix that, or that'll go away. Accept people for who they are today. And if you can do that, if you can honestly say, well, I can accept you the way you are with the flaws that I see and not change them, then I believe that's when you should make the decision to be with somebody. But if there's things that you question, listen to your intuition. It would be another piece of advice that I'd like to throw in on here. So tell me, we're about 30 minutes in. I really want you to give, in the next 20 to 25 minutes, I just want to hear from you. I want you to tell your story, relate to me, relate to these moms and dads on here, even the kids. Even there's we know there's a lot of alienated kids from these generations that, hey guys, it's not a shame game anymore. Divorce, we all screw up. I screwed up in my relationship. A lot of those things keep us silent, but we're here to say that it's okay to be flawed, and we want to talk about it. So tell us about your story.
It's very interesting, because I think that we have to recognize that we participate in our successes and in our failures. And for me, I was married. I got married to someone who we were friends, and I think that we should have remained friends. But I tried to build on that relationship and create something that really wasn't there. I wanted to build. My mom was dying of cancer. I wanted to build a family. She had always wanted kids, and I had a very, very low self-esteem. So, I only had one girlfriend prior to my ex-wife. So I had one girlfriend. I met my ex-wife and felt that she was, out of my league, prettier. I was always very, very self-conscious and nerdy. So, when I ended up getting into a marriage, I found that I was, it didn't feel right. And I made the wrong decision, and that I went outside the marriage and I had an affair. And I was like, okay, well, you have to face the music. Our actions, our decisions have consequences. And, I disclosed this to my ex, and naturally she was hurt and upset, and I broke the trust in the relationship. Now, I always tell people, I had felt so guilty for the affair that I ended up contributing greatly to the misery in my divorce and the path that I'm on now. But I tell people all the time, I'm not going to apologize for falling in love with somebody. The person I'm with now, we started out as friends, and we see eye to eye, and on the foundation is strong.
Right.
And I think that when you're in a relationship, one, you have to be like you're doing. You have the strength, the spiritual strength, and the resolve to work on yourself in a relationship. And it's very difficult
Yeah.
to work on yourself and to be a single in that
Hmm.
process. I think that for myself and many others, you would want some company for the ride and a little
Right.
assistance for when the times that I'm down or I'm having a tough time getting through. I can lean on you and you pull me through. So I find it very, very, very impressed by the fact that you were able to deal with, the effect of alcohol on your life,
Yeah.
and to go through the solo process of redefining your life and recommitting yourself to a healthier lifestyle, and then introducing somebody to it.
Well, I can tell you I wasn't alone. I didn't have a partner, an intimate partner. Although, I haven't been single, gosh, since I was like 20. I was always with someone, whether it was, in a relationship or intimately or whatever. And I realized it wasn't working. And I realized that I was on a hamster wheel, a cycle of, maybe I'm sure I did. I had some insecurities. I found a very beautiful woman, had kids with her, was very scared not to hold on, but also knew that I shouldn't hold on, and was, struggling with that, realizing that once I had children, this person, there was nothing I could do, and I was miserable.
Yeah.
So tell us, so you
Well,
had an infidelity in the marriage. Are you with that person now?
yeah,
That
we're
person?
still together. We're still
Okay.
together, and it's been a challenge because my ex is very vindictive, and she's done everything
Yeah.
possible to try to destroy any happiness in our lives, and she's pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But but one of the things I was saying, we contributed to our own success and failures, in that we had both felt so guilty for meeting each other, both married, that we spent a lot of time. We set the path through guilt.
Hmm.
That we passively allowed things to happen, uh, and held ourselves to a different standard. Basically, allowed it to happen out of guilt. We allowed so
Sure.
many things to happen because we felt bad. And in my ex's case, obviously, it was hard for the kids, and I wanted it to remain as life to remain as stable as possible for them. And my ex was a homemaker, so my intention was to keep her at home,
Hmm.
keep things as similar for the kids as possible, because the divorce, as we all know, is a huge stressor for the kids.
Right.
And in doing that, my ex was very savvy, and from the get go, she has a family friend that's an attorney. That, in retrospect, I could see how she was, expertly guided through all this. So I ended up agreeing to quite a bit in my stipulation, that I should have. What I tell people to do now is, like, don't be harsh, but be fair.
Hmm.
And the problem with it is this: like, I agreed to pay for the mortgage, the taxes, utilities, my ex's vehicle, her fuel for the vehicle, all the insurances and life insurance policies, and there was no cap and there was no endpoint, written in my agreement. So when it all boiled down, I was giving over 95% of my salary to my ex to remain in the house of residence. So I couldn't keep up $15,000 a month to my ex to maintain that lifestyle as a homemaker and survive on my own. So I quickly, my finances went on fire. I extended my credit. I'm trying to build a practice, and I'm
Yep.
basically, my head's on the water the whole time. And I try to warn people, like, whenever you get a stipulation and you have an attorney, go to somebody else, like go to a legal advocate or see a second attorney or a mediator to look at your stipulation, because there's so many things that my step, they were so egregious. I
Mm.
didn't recognize at the time. It's like, I just want my kids to be okay, is what I thought. And let me keep this the same. I paid utilities, and there was no no statements as to maintain them at their current rate. So my electric bill was like over $800 a month that I was
Yeah.
paying for my ex's house. I would have patients pass me like, "Doc, I went by your ex's house and every light was on, like every light."
Ridiculous.
And I was just like, "Oh, figures."
Uh,
I was getting $500 water bills. My ex was
just
still
running
spending
water.
money. Yeah, just spending money like crazy. And
Wow.
this all adds up. I couldn't keep up with that. And I remember the water bill in particular, because, like, what are you doing? are you leaving the hose on outside? Of course, she says, screw you and blah, blah, blah. And it turned out, I found out the very last time I was in the house, I was waiting for my kids, and I was in, the kitchen, and I heard the toilet running. And my son comes down, is like, hey, Dave, do me a favor, just jiggle the handle because the toilet's still running. He goes, oh no, it always does that.
Was the thing out?
Yeah. So what happened was, it was basically, the flap wasn't coming down properly. So water was continuously trickling 24/7. So this was going on for about 6 months, and I was getting two $500 water bills for it. And I was like, you couldn't fix that, or have, tell me to fix that, for that to happen. So that was just one of the things that I found out. My ex had used I was in a partnership for my practice. So we had a corporate credit card, and I was letting my ex still use it. And in the first Christmas season, when we had broken up, my ex spent over $15,000 shopping in November and December on my corporate card, and my partner went ballistic. I don't blame her.
Right.
And that was a big deal, because my partner's like, well, you're not getting paid until this bill is reconciled.
Right.
So I was like, now what am I going to do? I can't pay. I got a $6,000 a month mortgage. I have all this. How am I going to pay this now? And it led to a lot of stress.
Do you think we need to, as this shared parenting family law thing develops, obviously, because it's a fairly new creation, and hopefully we destroy it soon, but there needs to be protections in that sort of behavior. That is abuse, by definition. So, yeah. but the courts sort of look at it as, like that isn't very nice. But it literally bankrupts people. It ruins their lives.
The truth is that, I went bankrupt, and you talk to bankruptcy attorneys. When you look at the literature, it says divorce is the third leading cause of bankruptcy. And you speak to every bankruptcy attorney, they're like, divorce is the number one reason why we see people for bankruptcy.
Right.
And you have to look at other societies like Scandinavia, Sweden, I believe. They basically, their divorces are on paper. They very rarely do it that involves attorneys or litigation. It's like, all right, there's a set amount to raise a child. So, every child, pick a number, X amount per year is dedicated to raising one child, two child, three children. So there's none of this like lifestyle that the children would have,
that's another excuse.
Yeah, it's bullshit. And, the other thing that takes place is, women in Sweden have, they don't have the glass ceiling that we have here. They're more independent. They hold higher paying jobs, and so basically there's a gender equality, or at least it's approximated better. So they have a better system. Okay, this is how much life should cost. This is what you have to pay. You have 2 children, 3 children involved. Here's what you have to pay, and then that's your obligation. You don't have these sliding scale, things. And in my case, our lives become entertainment for the courts, and the courts were well aware of me before I got there. So like, this is a doctor who, had an affair, and everybody was waiting to make an example out of me. And that was, I think, one of the things that took place to me is it's like, all right, let's make an example out of this guy. And they were waiting the gun. My ex was telling me that she needed, what was it, $800 a month for new clothing for the kids every month. She needed $2,000 a month to feed them.
That's
absurd.
We
have 4 children together. So it's like, what are my kids eating steak and lobster every day?
For
every
breakfast
day at restaurants. And the courts had no problem with this, no problem whatsoever. And she was granted these things.
Right.
And the magistrate was so. I knew I was going down in flames from the minute I walked in. And I remember the magistrates. My attorney, here's another thing. I can't stand attorneys. I think that, when I look back, I had to have over 7 attorneys, and I really couldn't tell you which one was the worst. They were all so bad in different ways that I can't even tell you who was the worst one. So my attorney, my trial was awful, incompetent beyond description.
Right. But incompetent, you think on purpose?
I really got to wonder on that one. Honestly, I kind of wonder if he had something like pre-senile dementia, something like that. He was so bad that the attorney I had after him, when I was incarcerated, was trying to get me out and was saying essentially representing myself, that his performance was so substandard that it qualified as malpractice. And this is another attorney throwing my prior attorney under the bus. And the problem with this is like, how do you find an attorney? You talk to somebody, right? It's like, oh, who did you use? Who did you use?
Right.
My attorney for my trial, I actually took care of his kids, and he had a local reputation as being a really good divorce attorney. So of course, I hire him, and remind you, I take care of his kids. So he tells me what his retainer is, and I retain him, and then he sends me with his associate to all my court appearances. And we got to a point, this was like, listen, I'm not comfortable with this guy. It isn't going well. Right. Her attorney is making me look really, really bad. Like, you need to do something. I want you in there with me. So we had this big meeting, and all these pats on my shoulder. It's going to be okay. Here's the plan, and blah 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 blah. So I was like, all right. So I'm in there, and I'm like, this whole thing is a circus, but I guess this is the way they run it, because I provided all this documentation. Here's the facts on my side, so I should be okay. And the truth is, I tell people not all the time now, follow your instincts. If your attorney, if it feels like it's going bad, or you think your attorney's bad, fire him right there and then. Because if you're at the point where you're not an attorney and you feel like this is going bad, you should know that this is the thing to do. But I'm like, I'm in good hands. I take care of this guy's kids. He's got this reputation. And, it turns out that firm was the sleaziest firm that I've dealt with to date.
Sure.
And I've hired quite a few sleazeballs to represent me.
Well, and that's the thing. Where's the accountability? We have people in our system that should be held to a higher standard, and they should hold themselves to a higher standard. But you find that legality is the new criminality. It's like criminals are within the legal system more than they are criminals.
Well, I don't trust any industry that regulates itself.
Right.
Right. So now if you have a physician, a complaint's made against a physician, there's a Office of Professional Misconduct, there's hospital boards and ethics boards. And okay, you could say those are self-governed, but then you have attorneys over them that could still, no matter what those other entities find, declare the doctors, guilty, not guilty, there was some kind of misappropriation or misconduct. There's a price to pay for that. Then attorneys can come after you on top of that. Attorneys govern themselves. So how often do you hear of a case where the attorneys looked into a judicial complaint on a judge and it was unfounded? Most of these get tossed before they're even open, these complaints, and they represent themselves. So there's nothing you could do about it. So it's an illusion, in my opinion, that there's going to be some justice. They can go by unregulated, and this is how they daily trounce upon people's constitutional rights and God-given rights on every given day. There's nothing to stop them.
Well, there's us, and I think we've sort of been blindsided by this whole thing, and it's taking a while to get our footing. But I think that people are, with the generations of children who are waking up. Not only the parents are going through it, but there's generations of children that are now even my age or your age that grew up as kids in this court system. And so now you're having these different generations coming together and going, oh, I didn't know about that. Who learned about Title 4D? I didn't know what Title 4D was until this. Now it's like I know Title 4D as good as anything else I know, as good as I know how to play that guitar. And it's when I tell people about it, including my legislator, he's like, what's that? And I said, can you find out for me how much money the state of North Carolina made? And he sent me the numbers, and it was millions of dollars. That was just in my county. It was like 3 or 4 million, and it's been rising every fiscal year. And it was the most during COVID. And I was like, well, how's that possible? The stimulus money, because they took a lot of stimulus checks in.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things with that. Like, you had reminded me, I did an interview. There's an attorney that had a show that I was on. He interviewed me, and I brought up Title 4D, and he had no idea what it was. He had no idea what I was talking about. And I was just like, how the hell? It's just like, I don't know how you have no idea what Title 4D is at all. And I mean, this is a seasoned guy. He wasn't like, his first year practicing law. Sure. So that's one thing. And the other thing that bothers me is that, I follow Kenya Rockman's Child Support Hustle page. And I think it's a very informative page when you're looking at child support enforcement and whatnot. And, she posts all these states are bragging about these record numbers of collections that they're doing, during 2020 with the COVID crisis. It's like, people really need to recognize what's going on there. Most people were financially hit hard in 2020, lost their
Mm,
jobs, they were furloughed, whatever. So now you have these like non-custodial parents who are forced to pay child support for kids that no doubt they're not seeing,
most
and
likely.
you're throwing them into arrears and you're penalizing them at a time where there's an international economic crisis, and these states are bragging about how their collections are up, and
As
and
if
they
it,
use,
yeah,
and they use the premise that we're going after these
criminals.
deadbeat non-custodial parents. And it's like, what you're really doing is you're abusing power, and what you're displaying the fact that there's no mercy, no quarter.
Right.
No matter what. So it's not enough that you take these people's children away from them. You devastate them to the point, like, where are they going to turn?
Hmm.
Your only turn then is to go on unemployment or seek public assistance.
Right.
Which I think that ultimately, I'm going to get into my politics a little bit, but I
Yeah.
think that that's what the current ruling party wants, is they want you to be dependent on them for assistance, so that way you vote and you keep them in power.
Well,
And
yeah, like I don't understand how it's in my children's best interest. We don't make six figures. We make an average income. Herself, myself, roughly make close to the same. But how is it in my children's best interest to suck off a parent who makes a little bit more money to give to someone who's not willing to earn more money? And now we're both broke.
yeah, that's a big one, because willing to make more money is another one. My ex was never under any obligation. You know, it actually came up in my trial, and the magistrate went nuts that she didn't want to hear it. So my ex has a bachelor's degree, was a
Mhm.
teacher for a short period of time, as a homemaker, and the court has never held it to a standard where she even had to work even part time.
Right. They
Yeah,
didn't they don't impute her income based on,
yeah.
what she could be making. But,
So I took,
men, we're not allowed to switch jobs when we
yeah.
become single parents. We're supposed to still maintain the same level of, I was a restaurant manager. I was working 50, 60, 70 hours a week.
Mhm.
Well, if I want to have custody of my kids, I can't work those hours. So I have to make less money unless I can find a career that I make roughly
Yeah.
the same and can work during the day to be a single father. They
Well,
don't want us to be single. They don't want us to raise our kids.
no, the problem is they impute you to an impossible number. Like,
Sure.
I've worked with people that, somebody who I just spoke to the other day, he had a printing business, and,
Mhm.
with home printers and all the programs they have today, printing is essentially an obsolete industry.
Mhm.
So the industry is obsolete. He lost his printing business. He got a job in, I think, PC Richards, and he did a couple of DJ jobs on the side. Had a heart attack, and he has a judgment against him, and his ex is very vindictive and very cruel. And he's like, I just had a heart attack. I'm 60 something years old, like 62 years old. I can't make the money that I made in my 30s and 40s with my own business. I can't do that anymore.
Right.
But they still impute him at that level.
Right.
So essentially, he's just screwed because the court doesn't want to hear. They said, well, this is your highest earning potential. So now you
Ridiculous.
need to get a third or a fourth job. It's like, okay, well, if that's in my kid's best interest, what you're saying that, it's irrelevant for me to spend time with them. But what is relevant and actually is being dictated to me is I need to come up with a certain financials with a certain number.
Yeah.
To make me worth, my worth as a parent is how much I can make, not how much time I spend with my kids.
And then what they'll use against you if you're able to fight for custody while you're, because first they slap you with child support first so that you have that expense before you need to acquire an attorney for custody, especially I wasn't married. So it
Mhm.
was like, all right, you're taking, they lie in my situation, they lied about my income, which I can prove now that I have my taxes, but it already bankrupted me. So
Yeah.
it already did the damage. Well, I had to pay for attorneys with credit cards and loans. I had to take out loans, which means I had to default on my loans to pay for the attorneys. And, my whole I was financially, I had a lot of debt, but I had good credit. I could have had a house by now, all that good stuff. But in the blink of an eye, they take your kids, they make you fight for them. And I've had 3 attorneys. I'm on my 4th.
Yeah.
Why? What? It's like, how many surgeons do I need to perform a successful surgery?
Yeah.
Like, this is malpractice. They should be disbarred. There's no standard.
Well,
So
I got a big problem with that, because I think that there should be a high standard. Like, I have no problem with the standard set by my profession. I think that you need
right.
Obviously, not anybody could go to, law school, but okay,
Right.
you have to qualify to get into law school. You have to pass your bar, and then go. But I think that there should be specialty training. I don't think that you should be able to pass the bar and then go practice any type of, law you want to. Like, you
Sure.
wouldn't want me right out of medicine with no residency degree becoming a neurosurgeon.
Right.
I would kill. I'd kill people. I wouldn't know what to do, and I went to
Because you
medical
read a
school.
chapter maybe in your
Yeah.
book.
And it looks, maybe on paper I could take a test, but I can't perform that skill. So I really think that, the attorneys have an obligation to have specialized training. There should be specialized training in whatever law they're doing, elder law, family law, corporate law, contract law, whatever it is. They should have residency programs and board certification in those programs on
Right.
top of passing the bar. Then
Right.
to me, the profession would have some credibility and an oversight committee that truly is like a nonpartisan.
Well, the biggest thing too is unless there is something to contest, and typically the only thing that should be contestable is something that should be held in a criminal court. But there should be a time limit on custody battles, like 30 days. And in the meantime, there should be presumed shared custody, especially if there was in the home before. So an automatic, unless the parents say, hey, I got to work for right now. Well, they come up with it, but there needs to also be a financial cap. It shouldn't cost $300 an hour. It should be like, hey, I got to hire an attorney for $1,000 and they got to get it done, and they got to get it done in 30 days.
Yeah. I mean,
and move on with their lives.
I've heard, $300 is on the reasonable side. Some of these guys getting $500-$600 an hour. It's just like, whose life are you saving?
No, half the time they're dragging it out.
Yeah, they find people who could pay it, and that becomes the industry average. But I do want to talk to you back, because I want to go back to how you had credit and how you had to pay for everything. Because the truth is, this is the way the system's designed. I don't think this is by chance. Because what do? You start out with your net worth statement, which essentially tells the attorneys how much money they can get you for before you're tapped. So they know your net worth statement. Then you run out of money. Then you know what's going to happen next. You're going to turn to family and friends.
Right.
Then when you can't tap your family and friends anymore. Then you're going to go into well, it's family first, right? Then it's friends. Then you do your GoFundMe's when you really start getting desperate. And then when there's no money, that's when things just seem to end by the time you're tapped. And the system is perfectly designed for this. So right now you had to come up with yet another retainer, and then still go through these hourly fees and every email
and pay child support.
Yeah.
And find a place to live. If I didn't have, I'm living at my dad's, Carlos. I've been here for 2 years, and before that, I was renting rooms and sleeping on couches for like $200 and $300 a month, because that's all I could afford. Meanwhile, before that, I was making good money supporting. I say my 3 kids, supporting her and supporting them, and I worked all the time so I could take care of them. And when I decided to walk away, this is what I got, because I've upset her. You upset your ex, and that's fine. We may have made mistakes. So did they. But the vindictiveness is where you really get into the spitefulness, the abuse,
They provide the gun, they provide the bullets. What your vindictive ex-spouse has to do is load the gun and pull the trigger. I think they load the bullets for you too. It's just got to pull the trigger. Right. But when you look at it too, like, look, you mentioned I had to rent rooms, I had to do this. Does the court look into that? Like, where are your kids supposed to go on visitation? You can't even afford an apartment. So how do you take your kids to dinner? How do you spend the weekend with them when you're renting a room? Like, they don't look at these things. They make these judgments, and next thing you know, you have to find a way to go live that way. And your non-custodial parents, for the most part, are miserable.
Well, the way it sounds to me in many cases, and I haven't, in 2 years, I haven't gotten through with my trial or my hearing. But you financially screw a parent, and then hearing time and go, well, they can't even afford a place to live. Not when you're siphoning over half of my income. No, I can't. What world are we living in, Your Honor? Like, I don't mean to be down on attorneys. There are some good ones out there, but the problem is, guys, is I haven't seen any. There's a few in our movement. Yeah. There's a few attorneys that are very outspoken, and they probably make a good living being on this side of the fence, but they also get a lot of crap for it. But where is the common sense for people who are judging and ruining people's lives? Where is the accountability? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, at some point, a lot of times a lot of my friends will use the term 17. We got to go 1776 on their ass, which is,
Yeah.
which is get back to the fact that we're dealing with a tyrannical, corrupt, abusive system, and they work for us and they've forgotten.
No, that's true. And the other thing too is we're complicit in our own failures, and that we've, over time accepted it, and you take away one little liberty after another. Next thing you know, it's to a point of, no return. And I think that, for the time being, social media is our only shot, and I do fear, the recent censorships that we've been seeing through big tech. And I fear that maybe our days may be numbered as far as being.
Maybe. Well, if they take us off here, then we're going to have to hit the streets a little harder. And I don't think they're going to want that. They don't have enough jails for all of us.
That is true, and I really got to give credit to, our forefathers on this one, and the civil rights movement, the women's lib movements, and, I can't think of the LGBT movements. And they mobilize, they come out in big numbers. Right. And I think that that's one thing we haven't been able to do, but I think we don't mobilize out of fear. Too many people like, well, if I go to a protest, if I speak out, there's going to be a price to pay in court.
When you worry about your own case and your own situation, that's the only thing that's kept us from making quick changes, is everyone's worried about themselves. And I understand that fear to a degree, and I know that there's consequences to what I'm doing right here, but I'm doing the right thing, and I'm showing my sons the right thing to do, even in the face when the world feels like it's gonna be against you. And I've been arrested like you and put in jail, and I wanted to ask you about that before we have to go. And we're going to do this again. Definitely want to have you on again.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I'm trying to keep this thing at an hour, but I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for another 2 hours or two. But I do want to, I am interested in learning about your incarceration experience, and tell us how that happened.
Well, what happened was my attorney at the time, Patrick Kerr, this law firm, was incompetent, and there's malpractice from the get-go. And my ex, despite me giving $494,000 in 4 years is what I paid out.
Jesus.
Direct payment and payment of bills and policies and whatnot. So that I had put that. So I was like, there's no way that they're going to incarcerate me. I gave $500,000 in 4 years.
Right. You're paying.
The magistrate, everything that my ex claimed that she wanted, she got. $2,000 a month for food, yes. $800 a month for clothing, yes. Unlimited utilities, yes. The same vehicle she was, the lifestyle she wanted that she had when I was still married, she's entitled to all that. So she was, despite paying her $500,000 in 4 years, she still won a $160,000 settlement. So that was her award. So now I couldn't pay it. I was broke. I had nothing. My credit was extended. I had a practice, was going down the tube. Well, it was very, very busy. It was, successful in the fact that I was seeing a lot of patients, but financially it was a disaster because I couldn't keep up with, the overhead. So I was given a 1 month to come up with $80,000.
What was the percentage? What was the percentage they were taking of your income?
So the judge randomly threw half. I had a month to come out with 80%, 50% of the $160,000, judgment.
What was the percentage of roughly what you were making versus what you were having to pay on a monthly basis?
My ex was getting over 95% of my income.
How is that even? How is that even?
Well, that's part of what I speak out. That actually very rarely comes out, and I'll tell you how that happened. I had when my partner told me I wasn't going to get paid until my ex's $15,000 spending spree was paid. I ended up I couldn't pay my mortgage, and I was under a lot of pressure, and I ended up having a nervous breakdown. I ended up hospitalized. I come out of the hospital. My depression had gotten out of control.
Sure.
And
rightfully so.
So that happened, and I'm open about that now, but at the time it was devastating. So within 2 weeks of me being discharged from the hospital, being placed on medicine, my attorney drafted my stipulation. Basically everything my ex was demanding. I was just like, I just want to keep life for the kids as similar as possible.
Right.
That was my goal. But my attorney never warned me of what could happen if I couldn't keep up with all this. I was under the impression that I would keep things the same. My ex, when our youngest was in kindergarten and everybody was in school, she would start working and contribute to everything.
Right.
But she was under no obligation whatsoever for my stipulation. So my ex now was entitled, due to the stipulation, to 95% of my gross. Right? It's not even my net. It was my gross.
Now, how is that? I mean, I did the math. It was about 69, 70% when they lied about my income.
Mm-hmm.
So I was making about $2,600 a month, which, it's income. Obviously you're a doctor in New York. Our disparity in our income was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
I was a full-time musician, and I was working part-time in a restaurant just to make a few hundred extra dollars a week.
Mm-hmm.
But I was making $2,600 a month, but they had me, like you said, they imputed my income at a $50,000 or $55,000 a year restaurant management position. So I was paying $1,750 a month, making $2,600 a month. So then I took out a $10,000 loan to keep up with child support so that I didn't have an issue with it while I fought for custody.
Yeah.
But then the attorneys took forever and wound up asking for another 10 grand after we got to the trial. Eventually, I couldn't keep up. There was nothing to borrow.
Yeah.
There was no more credit. There was no more. I wasn't bringing enough money in. I couldn't work 60 hours a week and keep up with what I needed to do.
Yeah. It's hard, and it's all relative. I tell people all the time, because whenever I tell people how much I laid out, in the first 4 years, it always raises an eyebrow. Because it's like, if you're making $55,000 a year, right, and you're paying 40, it's
right.
relevant. If I'm paying 45, it's all relevant. So
right.
The fact, I see myself as any other victim, of this system, just with a different salary bracket.
You're still living at someone's house because you can't afford your own.
That's like I live with my girlfriend's now. But the truth is, like, you have to see what you're doing to everybody, and you can't take the average person. Like, my stipulation's written for like somebody who's making, like an investment broker who's making millions a year. You can afford to have somebody at such a lavish lifestyle and pay that off. I wasn't generating that salary.
Right.
So the courts had no problem. And the truth is, you're supposed to have these steps you take before you incarcerate somebody, right? You garnish their wages, you may put a fine, and whatever you do. Incarceration is supposed to be last. The magistrate not only put incarceration as the first step, but gave me the maximum sentence. So
let's talk about why. You mentioned it earlier, because they know that most likely that someone with some money that you can get it from.
Yeah, that I'm going to come up with it. And the story I wanted to get out was that at my sentencing, when the judge met with me the first time, told me I had a month to come up with $80,000. I turned to my attorney and said, "You might as well put me in today, because I'll have just as much chances today given $80,000 as I will in a month.
Unless you try to cross the border."
Don't be quiet. So I come back in a month, and then she's, I'll never forget this. She's looking at me. She's like, "You don't have a retirement. You don't have an IRA. You don't have a watch that you could sell and pay towards this judgment." And it's like, I have nothing. I have nothing. And so it's like, next thing you know, I'm getting cuffed. And my thoughts in my head, Chris, I curse all the time. I apologize on your show.
No, you're fine.
I go, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, is what I was thinking. So I have the court officers cuffing me behind I had a speeding ticket. It was the worst thing that I ever did in my life. So I go from having one ticket to now I've just been sentenced to 6 months in jail. Sure. And this is like, it's jail. It wasn't state penitentiary, but It was a maximum security facility out here. So it's like, you just took a nerd who never been in
a doctor, someone who treats children.
Yeah, and then I had a practice that I was taking care of thousands of people, and you incarcerated me. So, of course, and when I went in, people know right away that you're a doctor. So the corrections officers were like, "What are you in here for? Writing bad scripts?" It's like, "No, I'm in here because I couldn't afford $500,000 a year in child support."
Yeah,
and they were like, "What?" So in short time, and I actually took care of a lot of corrections officers' kids. So in very short time, the corrections officers realized I got screwed, and like, they took it easy on me. I wasn't
Right.
like a typical dirtbag, or I wasn't prescribing narcotics for cash. But it was, it was a very traumatic experience. And I was incarcerated with drug dealers, bank robbers, car thieves, and I'm in the mix. Like, what the hell's going on here?
You're a good dude that ran into a system that you could not
But here's,
appease.
here's the thing: when you have a civil offense, until the judgment's paid, you're in there to the minute. So
Right.
since I couldn't pay 160 grand, I had to stay 6 months to the minute. I was in jail with a gang member that beat somebody close to death with a bottle in the parking lot and was on a security camera.
Right.
And he was getting time off for time served
Right.
and good behavior. So it's like,
Yep.
you're gonna bridge his sentence. He almost killed somebody. I gave him $500,000, and I'm going to be here for the full 6 months.
And you don't. People who owe child support don't get bail. I found that out.
Yeah,
we don't get bail. A criminal, someone who's charged with murder, can get out on bail.
Yeah,
but someone who owes, they'll say, hey, you got to pay 10 grand, or you got to serve your 6 months, or something like that.
Yeah.
You have to pay that 10 grand or serve your 6 months. There is no 10% bail to get you out, so that you could, I don't know, maybe go to work and make some money.
That goes.
Yeah.
I have to apologize, because actually I have to head out soon. But I do want to take just a couple of quick things about jail.
Yeah, go ahead.
Even commissary, right? So you want to get like underwear or snacks or whatever, or clothing. You have to go through commissary. My girlfriend, when I got incarcerated, put $100 in my commissary account. Child support enforcement.
Don't say it.
So you're not even allowed to have commissary. So I had to get underwear from a crack addict that was incarcerated. He worked in the laundry. He worked in the laundry department. So he was able to get me underwear. So I couldn't even get underwear. I couldn't get a toothbrush. I couldn't get any like normal. Luckily, toilet paper is free, not through commissary, but I couldn't get anything. I had to get it from an inmate, because I couldn't get a commissary account. Wow. Right? Because anything that comes in is garnished. And the other thing that kept happening to me was they were sending me monthly child support enforcement bills. So I was getting bills for basically 160. Then the next month it was $175,000 plus 14% interest plus penalties. So I was rapidly,
while you're in jail,
spiraling in debt while I'm in jail. It's like, you won't even let me have a pen. So how am I going to cut you a check from jail? I have nothing. And there's no mercy, so jail itself, it was tough, being in that environment, because I was threatened by gang members. For the most part, I was okay, but there were threats, the threats that I would get beaten up at different points during the 6 months. It was very traumatic. And the whole part about being there and having your liberties taken away. And then for something like, I didn't commit a crime. I couldn't provide a lifestyle that somebody felt they were entitled to.
Right.
And the court took away my freedom. And if you're supposed to say that there's no such thing as debtor's prison, I love what they tell me I was incarcerated for. Yeah. I wasn't incarcerated for that. I was incarcerated for my failure to comply with the court order to pay a judgment. It's like, well, that's contempt.
Yeah, they reword it.
But listen, I want to say thanks for the opportunity to come on. I have to apologize because I have to head out. But
no, I want you to plug your show real fast before we go.
Oh well, I similar to you. I have a show called House Calls that I do on weekday mornings on iRadio USA, and that's on my Facebook page. But I want to do what you're doing, Chris. I want to have people be able to tell their story. I want to try to reach people before they become victimized, or to protect them from, being affected the way we were, and having our having gone through the heartache and the tears, and right. Especially the alienation, because I tell people all the time, my mother, I was very close with my mom, like very close. She walked on water in my eyes, and she died right before I went to medical school. My father died while I was in medical school. Right. And you take those two losses in that time frame, in med school, and then I lost my sister after. You combine all these losses in my life compared to alienation, and I will tell you, they pale in comparison when you put all three of those together to what being alienated is like. Right. So, I want to do what you're doing, and to to help fight for these alienated parents and for the kids that are suffering. So, I had the opportunity to do that on weekday mornings, but, I want to thank you for the opportunity on coming on your show and sharing this evening with the people who identify with you and the people
Right.
who listen to you. So really, my heartfelt thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Tell them where they can find you on that show. You said it's on your Facebook page. Where else can they tune in, and when's your next episode?
Well, it's actually tomorrow. So I have a show weekday mornings from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and you can find it on my Facebook page, Carlos Rivera. It's also on House Calls with Dr. Carlos.
Okay.
And iRadio USA's page. So I mean, there's the different platforms you can follow us on. We're on YouTube and whatnot. Yeah. But and my big thing too is if anybody has a story they want to share, please contact me, and I'll be happy to to let people tell their story.
Absolutely. And what you can do me a favor before we go, whenever you get time, send me those links and I'll attach them to this video so people can find it.
Absolutely, will do. You take care.
All right, man. Enjoy your night. We'll talk soon.
All right, be good.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you for the opportunity.